Seattle is leading the nation on a list that no one wants to top. Office vacancy rate is 36.5% in downtown Seattle, now the highest of any major U.S. city.
Since 2020, downtown office properties have lost a staggering $15 billion, or 46% of their value, and are generating $128 million less in property taxes.
Since 2020, downtown Seattle has lost around 30,000 jobs.
So Seattle has the highest office vacancy rate in America at 36.5%. And the mayor's answer is obviously more taxes, because that's going to work. Today, we're breaking down 5 things the president of the Downtown Seattle Association said on record on why this is going to turn into the same story with a different mayor, with this high progressive taxing situation that's going to destroy Seattle. Let's get into it.
Thoughts on that regarding the expansion of the payroll tax down the road, possibly?
Well, I think it's the wrong move for Seattle, and it would continue, I think, to push jobs outside of our city. And we don't need more business taxes in Seattle. We need more businesses located here paying taxes.
So this is his reaction on Katie Wilson even floating the expansion of the payroll tax, the jumpstart tax, as a fix for the budget shortfall. And notice he's not saying no taxes whatsoever, but the math isn't working. That's what he's saying. You don't tax your way into more businesses. You tax your way into fewer of them, and you get stuck taxing a smaller and smaller group of people who are left holding the bag.
Whose fault is this? Who did this? And the Seattle Times never wants to assign blame to the true culprits, which are often the Democrats, because the Democrats control everything. Downtown Seattle may be sending strong "we're back" vibes during its World Cup star turn, but downtown's economic engine is still stuck on the sidelines. Nearly 37% now. This figure, it was like 28% last year, and we thought that was bad. 37% of the downtown Seattle office space is vacant, the most of any major U.S. downtown. Seattle has the most vacant office spaces, and all these developers who have poured money into these buildings are writing off huge losses. It is scary stuff, and that's why they're calling them zombie, right? So here's a little bit of a glimpse at where we are compared to other places in the United States. So New York City, even the socialist-run New York City, has a 22% vacancy rate. The U.S. average is 23%. San Francisco, which is often referred to as sort of one of the most derelict cities in the nation because of how they handled homelessness and substance abuse.
And I know this seems redundant. We talk about this so many different times and so many different types of mayors, especially with Seattle, but I think it's important to talk about this and highlight this, because we've said it about Chicago, we've said it about Baltimore, we're saying it about Seattle, but redundant doesn't mean wrong. It means that the pattern keeps repeating itself because nobody is trying to fix the actual problem. Businesses are not hostages. They have options. Every time a city assumes otherwise, you're going to get this exact headline: record vacancy, record job loss. Same year this tax rolled out, the same year.
And I think it's important for the city to spend within their means. They haven't done that over the last 5 or 6 years. They've spent beyond the revenues that they've collected, and they've tried to make up the difference by putting a lot more taxes on Seattle employers, which have sent a lot of jobs elsewhere.
What is one of the #1 reasons why the tech sector is downsizing? In Seattle specifically, while it expands elsewhere. Capital gains tax. The capital gains tax, combined with a new income tax on quote-unquote millionaires, is sending the tech sector running. And it's not just the businesses that are here, the tech businesses that are here.
5 or 6 years. So this isn't something that happened because of the pandemic. This is a pattern of the budgeting. And this is the part that should bother people in Seattle, regardless of where you land politically, because for the most part, they're progressive. But this isn't a revenue problem being framed as a revenue problem. This is a spending problem being framed as a revenue problem. And those are completely different fixes. It's very similar to what's going on in New York City. We don't have unlimited amounts of money. You can't just continue to spend and spend and spend. Eventually, you're going to have a problem with your budget. Just like everyday people like me and you, cities have the same issue. But what they can do is try to tax themselves out of the problem. If you spend your past revenue every year and then try to close the gap by squeezing the same taxpayer base harder, you're not solving anything. You are just delaying the inevitable and making the eventual correction more painful. And these people making these calls, the Katie Wilsons of the world, a lot of them have never ran a payroll, never had to make a decision on whether to keep the lights on or to make rent. And that truly matters when you're trying to run an entire city. You don't know what you don't know.
As I mentioned, mentioned it's nearly $500 million. If you were across the table from her, what solutions, other solutions or advice would you give to her, in your opinion, that could solve this?
Well, first, I think we have to acknowledge the realities here is that the city doesn't have a budget deficit. They have more revenue than they had last year, more revenue last year than they had the year before. What they have is a spending problem, and they've spent beyond those revenues.
More revenue every year and still a $500 million shortfall coming. That's not the math problem you solve by adding another tax line. That's a math problem you solve by asking why the revenue keeps going up and the hole keeps getting bigger anyway. Has anyone had any answers to that? This is the core of the entire story, because once you accept we have a spending problem, then that entire conversation changes. You stop asking what else can we tax and you start asking what are we spending on and why doesn't it stop growing? That's a much harder conversation for city halls to have, because it means admitting that the pet projects, the programs, the stuff that sounds good in the press release, some of this stuff needs to be smaller, but nobody wants to be the mayor to say that out loud, especially if you are considered a progressive mayor or a democratic socialist. Spending is the game. Once you're able to admit that the spending isn't working, your base is going to attack you.
Make this place the best place to do business, the easiest place to open a restaurant or a retail outlet. We've got lots of empty office space in downtown, nearly 20 million square feet of vacant space. And, you know, that's not a great deal for those folks that own those buildings, but it's not a great deal for Seattle residents either, because the value of those buildings is about half of what it was just 4 or 5 years ago.
20 million square feet. That's not a couple of empty floors. That's the entire skyline's worth of nothing. Empty space doesn't sit there quietly. It actively costs the city money because vacant, devalued buildings pay less in property taxes than full value ones. And this is where it stops becoming just an abstract downtown business story and it becomes a story for the people's wallets in Seattle, because business owners vote with their feet. They're not walking away because they hate Seattle. They're walking away because the numbers just stop working. And when enough of them leave, that's the tax base that's left to make up the difference. That's not a business problem anymore. That's a homeowner problem. That's a renter problem. Why did my property tax bill go up again problem?
Those buildings were paying a lot more 5 years ago to contribute to city property taxes, but also school district property taxes and the county and state property taxes than they are today. And that property tax burden shifts to residents. So if you care about affordability, you ought to care about downtown Seattle having a high vacancy rate, and we should be working every day to lower that rate, make downtown attractive for companies to locate here, to fill those spaces, to raise the value of those properties, to take some of the burden off residents in Seattle.
This is the line that puts it all together, because the affordability conversation and the vacancy rate conversation gets treated like two separate stories when they're not. They're the same story. When those office towers were worth twice than they're worth now, they were carrying a much bigger share of the property tax load. City, school district, county, state, all of it. And now that value has been cut in half, that burden doesn't vanish, it shifts. It shifts straight to the residents. So if the answer to how do we help affordability is, well, let's just add another tax, you're actually making the vacancy problem worse, which makes the affordability problem worse down the line. It's a circular situation. And this is the same challenge every progressive city seems to hit. For this to work, you have to incentivize the people with money to actually want to keep their money there. And so far, they haven't figured that out. So we got the same pattern. It seems like we're repeating myself all the time, but we have to document this. It's important for everyone to know exactly how not to run things. You got people in city leadership that never ran a business, never made payroll, never had to pay insurance, never had to sit across from an employee and explain why they didn't get a raise this year, or when the money runs out. The answer to all these people is tax the people who are already here and tax them more. And the people are getting tired of it and they're leaving. The math is not working. According to the guy who runs the Downtown Seattle Association, it does not work. 20 million square feet are empty. Highest vacancy in the country. $500 million shortfall. More revenue every single year and still not enough to pay for things because the spending kept climbing to meet it. And we haven't even talked about the homeless situation or the crime situation. We've talked about that countless of times. They have to deal with that as well. But it's all connected to this because that affects whether businesses want to even be downtown too. But this is a case study of really incompetent progressive, policy making. Seattle is the receipt, and we're going to see what's going on in New York. When you spend too much money, you're going to have this kind of problems. When you do not want to incentivize the people with money to spend their money here, you will continue to have these problems. And the people who suffer the most are the ones who have to be stuck there paying these high taxes. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. And if you have not subscribed, hit that subscribe button as we reach 200,000 subscribers. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. And I'll see you guys in the next video.